I'm going to guess I'm probably the only person in the room, or maybe there's a handful, that yesterday read the Scranton Times newspaper in paper like in the old days when people threw it at your house. Okay, so breaking news on yesterday, front page below the fold, so it wasn't as big as what was above the fold. Breaking news was this headline that was on the front page. How long is too long for Christmas decorations? That's a pretty good question, isn't it? So just a moment of honesty. How many of you have already taken down your tree? Anybody want to admit? We got right there, okay, on to the new year. That's great. I do know of one other family that already did it too, mainly because they don't put water in the base at the bottom, and you can just hear the pine needles falling, literally, on the recording. Their son enjoys jumping up and down and making the Christmas tree. It's the fastest they've ever gotten the Christmas tree out of the house. But it was kind of interesting to read that. And I looked at it and I thought about how it's like the unanswerable question, when is Christmas over? I know at our house we still have our tree up. It escaped being put away by me having another reason to do something different yesterday, like study for this morning. But it's just that moment of looking outside and seeing the decorations we put outside and thinking there's coming a point where we need to get out there and at least turn them off. But just think about, when is Christmas over? And, that's just kind of a sad thing. I personally think that Christmas has like this massive buildup starting now in July. At Hobby Lobby, where the Christians go to shop. It's like, we're coming, it's coming, So you get this big messy, and you finally get to the day, and then it's like, it's over. It's like, what's next? Ohio State football is wins. Anyway, but what? It's called the Rose Bowl. Who mentioned that? Penn State's playing too, but I don't remember what. When are they playing? I don't want to miss it. Tuesday night, before or after my bedtime? Okay, all right, good. Got that one. I'm off the hook here. But it's kind of like, okay, we're on to what? College football playoffs are still going on. And I think about how sad that is. And I found myself thinking about the favorite theologian that I like to quote by the name of Yogi Berra. He said, it ain't over until it's over. Now, I have to admit, I have this concern that some of you don't have an idea who in the world I'm talking about when I talk about this theologian. And some of you think I'm talking about a character in a cartoon who lives in, Jellystone Park? So I want to clarify things for you right now. And I have two pictures for you. One is of Yogi Berra, arguably one of the greatest baseball players ever. And he played for the New York Yankees, but God forgives all sorts of things. But anyway, it's... Yogi Berra, boy, if you can see a documentary on his life, you'll understand why I say he's like one of the all-time greats. And then there was a cartoon called Yogi Bear, and people get that really confused. So here's this bear out in Jellystone Park with his buddy Boo Boo, and they're in these adventures, and here's Yogi Berra, who was just a master at maligning the English language. And he's the one who said, it ain't over until it's over. He's the one who said one day to a friend, he was giving directions to his house, and he said, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. Okay, good. Yeah, that works. He said, you need to always go to your friends' funerals, because if you don't go to theirs, they're not going to come to yours. And I do like after his rookie year, we'd been such a sensation, he went back to his hometown of St. Louis, and they had this big reception, this big community gathering, and Yogi stood up and said to them, I am so sorry I've made this day necessary. Just like that over and over and over again. And I do, literally, you can check me any day, I keep a Yogi Berra quote in my Bible on a Post-it note. And that Yogi Berra quote is one of my favorites. He says, you can see a lot just by looking. And every time I open my Bible to this page, I'm reminded I can see a lot just by looking. And so I went back to Yogi Berra's quote, it ain't over until it's over. And it's kind of interesting to think back. Okay, can you think back to last Christmas Eve? That was a long time ago. Do you remember the very last song we sang last Tuesday night? Anybody remember? Go tell it on the mountain. Go tell it on the mountain. I told David Harris the other day, I said, boy, you guys really put up the volume and really pushed that song out there. And that song, and we're singing it, go tell it on the mountain, go tell it on the mountain, go tell. You see, that's like the unnoticed portion of the Christmas story. Because on December 25th and the 26th, when we celebrated on that particular day, we kind of come to take down the tree, take down the lights, eat the rest of the candy and the cookies. You know, we come into this kind of mindset. Christmas is over, but Christmas is not. It ain't over until it's over. And we really emphasize that by singing that song, because this message isn't just about having a big party. It isn't about just having this special time of remembering one another. It isn't all those kind of bells and twinkles and everything else that goes on. It's about Jesus, who said that he came for one primary reason. And that one reason was stated in Luke chapter 19 when he said, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. And then when you think about toward the end of his earthly ministry, when he was there with his disciples on that mountaintop, and in 2 letters, what word did he tell them to do? Go. Now, he didn't say go tell it on the mountain, but he said go, and talked about the importance, our task. I mean, the prime objective for us is making disciples who make disciples. And Christmas doesn't end because we turn the page on the calendar. And just as we sang the other night, we need to join Jesus in his mission to get out there to tell the world about the one who came, whose birth they just celebrated. Well, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about what that means, because we talk about it, don't we? We say, you ought to go out and witness. You ought to go out and tell others about Jesus. You ought to invite people to church. You ought to not kick your neighbor's dog. Whatever else you think it is, it's positive witness, you know. But what I want to talk to you about this morning is not just about the act of going, but the kind of people we must be if we are going to join Jesus in his mission. You see, when we gather together, I did some dictionary reading recently. That's really exciting, I know, but Yogi Berra said you can see a lot just by looking. And I looked up the word sermon. What is a sermon? And it's a talk on a religious topic. So maybe you can call this my New Year's resolution. I already started it back at Halloween, so maybe it's a Halloween resolution. I'm not going to preach any more sermons. No more sermons. I'm not going to get up with the time God gives me left to declare the Word of God and just talk about a religious topic. What I did then is I looked up the definition of the word message. Message is a little bit more finger pointing. Sorry. I'm trying not to aim at anybody in particular. But it's more direct. It's not just saying, let me tell you about the city of Nazareth and what their building codes were like. No. Yeah, I talk about the Bible, but there's a point here. And as we look at the Word of God and we keep studying the Word of God, it's why no matter how old you are or how young you are, there's still lessons for you to learn. No matter how many degrees you've got, there's still lessons for you to learn, because we're in the process that we are to be more like Jesus. We are predestined to be conformed to his image. We are in that process now where we need to be changing. And if we're going to join him in his mission, we need to look at his life and say, well, what does that look like? And what kind of person do I need to be? And we're going to look at a very familiar story to learn about what we must be in order to join Jesus in his mission. And would you take your Bibles, please, and turn to the book of Luke, not chapter 2, we're past that season, to Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. That's the passage where Jesus said, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. And when we look at this passage, it's going to teach us about what kind of people we need to be. So I'm going to read this very familiar story here. It's one where there's a song written about it, and I thought very tempted to have everybody sing that particular song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. And you know that I'm seeing some smiles on the faces for those of an age that remember that song. And those of the age that saying, I think I remember that song. Those of the age saying, I've never heard that song, but it's based on this passage. So listen to it, okay? Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached that spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Lord, look, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Isn't that interesting to take that verse we know so well, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost, set it in its context. And see it here in this dynamic of Jesus with Zacchaeus. Yeah, we immortalize him in song because he wasn't very tall. Yeah, we remember him for climbing a tree. But haven't you seen pictures of parades and other events where people climb light posts at the corner or whatever there is so that they can see over the crowd? It's not an unusual. He's not the only person to have ever done that. But when we look at this closely and see how Jesus handled this situation, we're learning something about Jesus, one aspect of his evangelistic ministry, of reaching out, seeking the lost. And the one thing you don't find is him saying, well, Zacchaeus, I hope you get down to the synagogue someday. I'm going to be preaching there in a few weeks. No, we find Jesus not saying come. He's saying find Jesus. He's going to go. I want you to keep that in mind as we start to look at just what kind of people we need to be to join Jesus in his mission. And to join him in his mission, here's what we must be. First, we must be intentional, focused on making outsiders insiders. Now, if you have the outline sheet, some of you already know that there's going to be underlines. When you see the underline, what do? Write it down, fill out the blank, because you ought to take these kind of things home. My message is only as effective as your memory, and my guarantee is 10 minutes after this message is over, out in the lobby, some of you, you talked about Zacchaeus. You need to learn the point, the impact of the message for our lives. And this thing about being intentional is really focused on making outsiders insiders. Verse 5, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. He is focused on not just getting through town. He's just passing through. People know he's passing through. They're starting to line the streets. Zacchaeus wants to see him. Jesus, and he's focused not so much on where he's going right at that moment, but there's this man Zacchaeus. And there's a dynamic here being intentional like that. And he's talking to Zacchaeus, which his name means the righteous one, but he was a known and disliked person. He was a chief tax collector. And those of you that are fans of The Chosen or have watched it, seen the portrayal of Matthew, and in the early scenes, just how protected he was because he was so hated because he was a Jew who had become a tax collector for the government at that time. And now here's Jesus, and he's looking up that tree, and there's Zacchaeus. And what you're finding is this thought, that 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Jesus was always ready to reach out. Now think about that dynamic, about being intentional in the course of the day. Now today's Sunday, and your day may be a day that you go home, eat lunch, and just hang out at home. But through the work week, Billy Graham said the next great movement among in the area of people coming to know Christ would be found in the marketplace. And I remember the day when I was selling Harley Davidsons that we were sitting in a sales meeting, and the owner looked around the table and he said, you know, you people will spend more time with your coworkers here this week than you will spend with your family. Wow. I didn't like that thought, but that was the reality. But it was also a re-emphasis of the fact that as a salesperson at Harley Davidson, I had to be on mission 24/7, no matter what was going on in that store, no matter what I thought about it, no matter what. Every opportunity was an opportunity in some way to just raise the flag, let them know that I'm a follower of Christ. And God opened some wonderful doors through that, just being willing and being willing to follow through when it came through. And Jesus had that kind of intentionality, 24/7, always ready to reach out to help outsiders become insiders. And the Bible is filled with these outsiders. Okay, it's still Christmas time, maybe, depending on where you are mentally with the Scranton Times article. It's still Christmas time. You look at the genealogy of Jesus, 3 women in there. Tamar, who portrayed herself as a prostitute. Rahab, we usually describe her with the phrase, the harlot. You come down to Bathsheba, the person with whom David committed sexual immorality and ultimately murder. You look down through there, and some of those, like even Ruth, a Moabitess, and I'll let you just do some extra research on Moab and what it meant to be a Moabitess in the lineage of Jesus. And then as you work on into the New Testament, you're finding how Jesus would reach out. Roman centurions weren't exactly like Jesus would reach out to them. Jesus would go around lepers. Lepers had to just yell, unclean, unclean, don't get anywhere near to me. And here comes Jesus. And Jesus is with the lepers, and Jesus is healing the lepers, crossing over all sorts of boundaries. He talked to the Samaritan woman. That's a sexual boundary. That's a religious boundary. That's a geographical boundary. That's a whole bunch of boundaries. The disciples come back, and Jesus is talking to a woman by the well. Because more important than what people thought about boundaries, more important than viewing people as insiders or outsiders, was Jesus says, so every person was a person for whom he came. And I've told people many times that you will never look in the face of a person whom God does not love and for whom Jesus did not die. But raising up that sense of intentionality, 24/7, we're seeing where God has taken us and where there might be opportunity for us to share the good news of knowing Jesus Christ. And with that, we followed up about we must be indiscriminate, willing to reach out to anyone. Yeah. It'd be easy to get up on a Zacchaeus, look at Zacchaeus and say, there's no way in the world that guy'd ever become a Christ follower. Some of you remember, former member here, Carlton Houck. Carlton got me to go to Dallas SCI, the State Correctional Institute, down that direction. And even we sometimes took our choir down there to sing because they'd worked on a cantata or whatever. And hey, why don't we do it at the prison also? And we'd be in that room on a Sunday morning or a Sunday whatever, and whatever day of the week it was, about 200 prisoners gathered in that chapel. And it was amazing to be with individuals, with these men, that some of them had committed heinous crimes. But God was reaching out to them. And one just side note, Carlton, he's older than he was when he was here in the 90s. You know that? He is still at it. He is still at it in the prison. Still at it. And COVID has really messed things up in a lot of ways, but he's still at it. And it doesn't matter what the group is. Carlton is in that prison, ready to be still at it with that kind of indiscriminate outreach mindset that he's going to reach out. And the Life Application Bible says this. In every society, certain groups of people are considered outcasts because of their political views, immoral behavior, or lifestyle. Don't give in to social pressure to avoid them. Yeah. You know, I was telling my brother down here a story about our Christmas train. We have a Christmas train, and I bought it when we lived here back before the turn of the century. Isn't that fun to say? Sounds so old. I was a teenager when I was the pastor here. Father, forgive me for I know I have sinned. But it's an LGB model. It was made over in Germany. Big format kind of thing. And I put it around my tree one year, and I took a picture of it. I put up our LGB train and put it on Facebook, where you're sure to get comments. And sure enough, I got one. You know, why was I promoting the LGBTQ plus community? Yeah, it's a train. It's a train. It's a train. Yeah. But when I got out of being totally at the church world and moved into the marketplace, was selling used cars, at that point I had more LGBTQ, however the acronym goes now, LGBTQ plus friends than I'd ever had in my life. Some of them were customers, some of them were coworkers. And I'm there as a person who had to be careful in the dynamic of being in the marketplace and the emphasis on diversity and how am I a witness among, but there was definitely opportunity there, and God brought those people into my life. And Joan experienced the same thing with her work, brought people who were LGBTQ plus into her life. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we're going to be indiscriminate. It doesn't matter what country they're from. It doesn't matter what color their skin is. It doesn't matter what their religious belief is. It doesn't matter what political party they belong to. It doesn't matter if they drive a Chevy instead of a Ford. It doesn't matter whether they root for Penn State or root for other teams that some people like. We're indiscriminate. I was sitting in chapel at Southern Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. I say Louisville. It's fun to ask other people how they pronounce the capital of Kentucky. And most people say Louisville or Louisville. It's pronounced Frankfurt. That's the capital. So that's a fun thing, a little tricky. But I was down there, and Alistair Begg was speaking in his Irish accent or Scottish accent, whichever it is. We always like those kind of accents from over there. And he started talking about a book. I'm going to show you the book here on the next slide. It's called The Secret Confessions of an Unlikely Convert. Rosario Butterfield was a tenured professor at Syracuse University. She was a very active participant in the LGBTQ plus community, and she really didn't like Christians. She would drive into a church parking lot sometime, read the bumper stickers, and just kind of shake her head and laugh at Christians. And I'll tell you what happened. There was a pastor who became friends with her, a pastor that invited her into their house. That pastor and his family ministered to her, built a relationship with her. Today, she's married to a pastor and serving God very effectively as a person who moved away from the lesbian lifestyle to being a follower of Jesus Christ, and her life was changed. But where did it start? We would say it started with a pastor who was willing to say to a woman with whom he had little to agree on these moral issues and accepted her as she was in hopes of helping her to become all that Jesus wanted her to be. If I were being blunt, I'd say just take your prejudices and flush them down the nearest toilet and realize that Jesus died for anybody with whom you have a disagreement or for anybody whom you dislike. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we're going to be reaching out to them because that's what Jesus came to do, to seek and save not the church elders, not the church deacons, not the church treasurer. He saves them too, because they're in the group to seek and save the lost. Get the book. We don't have Christian bookstores anymore, pretty much. So unless a pastor recommends a book, you'll probably never find it. This one I read several years ago. I really encourage you to get the book and read it. But the third thing we must be is we must be unpredictable, not bound by normalcy, which is the way most people describe my preaching. Anyway, by verse 5, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. Now here you got this scene. Here's Jesus. He's on his way. He just passing through town. He's got someplace else to be. And he's walking along, and people are there lining the streets. He sees this guy. I mean, can you imagine? If I did it, I'd be walking down the street. I'd see somebody up the tree. I'd stop and say, Adam, come on down. I want to have lunch with you today. Adam, are you here? Yeah, he cuts trees. That's why I picked that name. But anyway, it's just like, who does that? Who does that? But I remember a day when Joan and I were in seminary, well before the turn of the century, and we had a friend who was a Pennsylvania Dutch huckster, and he was connected with a lot of Mennonites, and that's where his family had been from, and he went to the same church, and we were friends with Charlie. He was in his 80s. We called him the Dean of Men at the seminary. He lived right across the street. And one day he's kind of like, hey, I've got to go down to the mission in New York City, the Bowery mission. I'm going with a group of Mennonites. Why don't you two come with me? He said, okay, Charlie. Why argue with Charlie? Charlie didn't quite say it that way. He had a more gruff way of talking. He goes, go on. So we get on the bus with Charlie. We go down to New York City. We head to the Bowery mission. We got all these people from church there to hold a service at the Bowery mission. We're all getting out of the bus, person after person after person, and they're filing into the door to go into the mission, to take a tour, see what's going on, except Charlie. Charlie got out of the bus. I went and sat down in the gutter next to a man. That's a striking image this many years later. I remember Charlie getting off the bus, going over, sitting down in the gutter, talking to a man about coming into the building for the service. That's the way Jesus was. He wasn't bound by normalcy. And we'll find different people in different ways are being a witness for Jesus Christ. And you take your own personality and your own style. We're not going to all do it like Billy Graham. We're not all going to do it by some other famous evangelist. We do it with our own personality, how God made us. And some reason God made us this way, and he can use us this way. And we take our gifts and abilities and let God work in our lives. So here we are, being like Jesus in reaching out to this world. And the next one I want you, well, you look at it, you know, he talked to lepers, Samaritan women, Pharisees, Roman soldiers. Now this scene with Jesus calling out Zacchaeus, there is a short 3-minute TikTok video on this one that I found once. And I love this line in it, where the disciples are saying to Jesus not to do it that way. This is going to go viral, and it won't be good for your reputation. Yeah. Which is more important, reaching out to a person who needs Jesus or maintaining your reputation? If you ever see something and you're wondering about me, just come up and ask me, what were you doing? I had that happen once. Right out of my first year in college, I worked in a brickyard, and that brickyard was in southern Ohio and very prejudiced. I was a low man on the totem pole, being just a guy they give the worst jobs to. But at lunchtime, the whites had the lunchroom, and the blacks went to the other end of the factory and sat on pallets of bricks and ate their lunch. One of the other college-age guys, a guy named Trent, he and I had a little bit of a friendship, and that particular black guy was really disliked by the white guys. Won't go into details on that, but they really did not like him. Trent and I were working together one day, and it comes time, the whistle sounds for lunch, and Trent looks at me and says, hey, why don't you come down and eat with my dad and the guys? And we keep talking. I said, okay. So I went up to the lunchroom for the whites only, got my lunch bucket, went down to the other end of the building, of the factory, and sat down with the black guys, had lunch with Trent and his dad, and we sat there and talked. That afternoon, I'm in a section where I'm working all by myself. Those of you that have union background will understand me when I say this. The shop steward came to see me. I wasn't union yet. I didn't have to work. I wouldn't be there long enough to become union, but they sent the shop steward. And he came over, and he just kind of got my attention. He looked at me and said, where were you at lunch today? I said, I was eating with Trent and his dad, the guys. Why were you doing that? I said, we were talking about the Bible. Oh, I should have known. I walked off. I don't always do things like that. I mean, I don't always have these. That's not the consistent in my life. But that one from back when I was in college just sticks in my mind of the shop steward just going, oh, I should have known better and walking off. Because it might be somebody comes up to you and says, well, what were you doing there? You know, why do you go to so many baseball games? I'm the chaplain of the team. I can go in the locker room. I can talk to the guys. Oh, okay. You know, you can explain things like that. But we also just must be counterculture in our thinking. See, verse 7, all the people saw this and began to mutter, he is gone to be the guest of a sinner. And so we reach out to those who are least like us. And the more we're like Jesus, well, the people that are least like Jesus in the Bible, they like Jesus. And the more we are like Jesus, the more they will like us because we're reaching out to them in a way that's counterculture at times. And Don Lemon, I actually got criticized for reading a book written by Don Lemon. The person said, "What in the world were you doing reading a book written by Don Lemon?" He's a former CNN commentary person, and he's in the gay rights movement, and he wrote a book called "This Is the Fire." Now, I have traveled a lot, and my wife can tell you I fall asleep on airplanes. I've fallen asleep during takeoffs. I've fallen asleep and stayed asleep through landings even. The worst one was the time I was on a train and I fell asleep, and they parked the train in the train yard for overnight, and I was still on the train sleeping when I woke up. I was in seminary, and I'm like, whoa, we're not going anywhere, are we? So I'm a champion at sleeping in moving vehicles. And so I took that book, and I was going out to speak in Missouri, that conference where they wanted me to talk about cutting through the cultural fog. I did not sleep either leg of that flight, captivated by that book. See, there are things I know because I've read and I've been willing to listen. I encourage that. Be willing to read and listen and learn and become more effective in your outreach. And here's what Don Lemon wrote, because he did have a background in an black evangelical church growing up. He said, instead of having the pew hinder you, having the church hinder you, instead of being segregated in the church or among yourselves, go out and have a barbecue and meet people and start breaking bread with people and getting to know them. That's the quote that I use out of that book. But that's what we need to think about. Jesus was counterculture. He wasn't locked in. It's all got to be at the synagogue. No. And my observation is this, that churches that don't connect with their culture become repurposed buildings. You aware of that? I've seen coffee shops that are in churches, floral shops that are in old church buildings, bookstores in old church buildings, real estate offices, lawyers' offices in old church buildings. And I see those buildings I remember the first time I saw a church building with a sign out front that said, "For sale by owner," and I said, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I know what they meant, but I see a church building and I say, at some time that church connected with this community. And that's why there's a church there. But over time, they lost that connection. And that's why now it's a florist shop or whatever. Keep that in mind as we think about what we must be, because we must be willing to risk our reputation. Verse 7, it talks about how the people murmured, and sometimes we just need to let them talk. Not going to worry about those, Don't major on the whiners. You don't live by the standard set by people that talk about other people. You live by the standard of the Word of God, because we want to be like Jesus, and we must be authentic in the sense that we share in the most natural of circumstances or situations. That here we are. I mean, the most natural circumstance is, hey, having something to eat together, meeting for a cup of coffee. It's like level ground. You're at the coffee shop. I'm a frequent coffee shop person. I'm a frequent breakfast person too, because it's so much better than say, can you come to my office or something like that. Say, hey, you want to meet for breakfast? I'll buy. Want to meet for a cup of coffee? I'll buy. Those last two words are kind of good words, aren't they? I have a blessing that I'm still involved with CBMC, which is defined as Christian Businessmen's Connection. I define it as CBMC as coffee, breakfast, more coffee. That feels more like my ministry. But there are people that still support me on a part-time basis, so I can meet with a guy and say, hey, can we talk? Can we get together? And so I'm not rich. I just have people that say, hey, Tony, keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate that. So you might not want to say, I'll buy. Don't say, Tony will buy either, okay? Write that down on your notes. Tony will not. Well, maybe I would. Let me know. If there's a good reason, really good reason. But that's what Jesus did. So YBH, help me out. This is my 4th time preaching this year. Last time this year. What's YBH stand for? Yes, but how? I heard one voice. Glory, Jesus, we're up to one. Okay, good. Yes, but how? How do you join Jesus in mission? So first of all, I like this phrase. It's from a CBMC mindset. Leave a stone in their shoe. You get a stone in your shoe, you're walking away and it's going, I got something stuck in my shoe. Stone in your shoe, that you just act in a way that you're just a bit different. They say, there's something different about that person. I'm not going to go too much further with that phrase. Okay, but they see a difference that Jesus makes in our life. You have a complaint with a business, go make your complaint in a Christ-like way. I call up, and I call up the 800 number, and the person answers, and I say, listen, I know this is not your fault, but I want you to help me a bit because I've got a bit of a problem here. And sometimes at the end of the call, I say, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. You have an important job because you're helping people like me with things like this. I said that one day I called to make up a doctor's appointment. At the end, I said, hey, listen, I want to tell you, you have an important job. Now, the reason I think that way is because Philip Keller said that any job that contributes anything to the good of society is a good job. Yeah, isn't that amazing? No matter how low on the social totem pole it is, it's a good job. And I said, you have a good job there, and you help people like me with our help, and I just want to say thank you. There was a pause, and then she said, you've made my day. Yeah, And we just leave it so. Or we can just raise the flag, just let them know we're a Christ follower. And I know I've got my IBM disease. That's why I come up the back steps here, and everybody hopes I can walk across there and not trip on the cords. And that's the only good reason to go back to a piano and organ. There's no chords, but no, let's stay with this. I like this. But this is my disease, and I've got my opportunity to share my faith with my neurologist, with my hematologist, with my urologist, my thisologist who has no ology to him. He's my GP, and it's just all these different, and my physical therapist, where they say, how you doing? I say, well, I'm somewhere in the good process. See, I'm a person of faith. If my faith doesn't affect the way I live, what's use my faith? And my faith says, God, all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called to. I'm somewhere in the good process. That's what my faith does for me. And I can say that with a flat tire down at Cost Tire even. I can say that in a lot of places. Just finding ways we can just raise the flag. We can just raise the flag. Now, we went to the Ark Encounter last summer, and lots of people were wearing Jesus kind of T-shirts, some sort of Jesus theme thing, And I was so tempted, though I was in a little mobile thing, so I couldn't walk around and look them eye to eye. I just could run over their toes maybe and ask them. But I just kept wondering, how many of them ever share a verbal word of witness? Or do they just wear the T-shirt? How many just wear a T-shirt, but they don't share a verbal word of witness? I see, that's a challenge for us. It's learning not only how to do that, but learning how to build the relationships where we open the doors so we can share that verbal word of witness. So I want you to understand that what we need to do is we need to be living proof. And my phrase that I've said again and again, and nobody's been able to prove it wrong, the best apologetic, the best defense of our faith today is not arguing from history, not arguing from philosophy. The best apologetic is a life well lived. When people see how you handle the storms of life, when they see how you treat other people, how you get along with people with whom you disagree, how you bear that witness, but how you live, and that can build that relationship to where you then can share that verbal word of witness. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but with CBMC, we have a series of video clips and a Bible study, a discussion guide. It's all free, so I'm not up here selling CBMC stuff, but I hope you find it. Maybe you want to use it in a community group or something like that about the Living Proof Adventure, and I want to show you my favorite video clip out that, technology willing. Okay, go guys.
A true connection is a fragile thing. It needs to be built on trust and time. Horses have been part of my childhood from the time I was just a little bitty guy. I grew up in Haiti, where my family lived with the people in order to form a connection with them. The horses were one of the ways that we connected with the people. Horses are prey animals, so their instinct is to buck and run away. It's our job to make a connection with them, to teach them that it's okay for us to even get on them. I learned a technique called join up from a man called Monty Roberts, who learned this technique by studying wild horses. I can take a horse from any country, and within just a few minutes, using their own language, can form a bridge between us that will allow him to begin to trust me and to follow me willingly. Okay, so I'm going to step to his shoulder, asking him to leave me. I would like to help him see me as the leader, and I'm going to mimic his language. We're going to chase them a certain distance. I will start looking for language, and I want the inside ear to be tipping towards me, saying that I'm aware that you're there. Also, I'm be looking for head down, and then usually they'll come in towards me a bit. Once I have all those signals in place, then I will invite him to come to me. It's the same idea with people. You can manipulate them into having them see your way. Or you can encourage them to see your way, because after all, we have what they need. And it benefits them directly also. And so the idea is to form a partnership, a willing partnership, where each side benefits. And in order to do that, you have to invest time and effort and care and love into those people so that the relationships last longer than 20 seconds. And the key is that you have to give of yourself in order to make things better. If they're not ready to hear, if their heart is not ready to hear the gospel, they won't hear it. So you have to wait for those moments in time where God is speaking to them, their heart is open, and you can deliver it.
Good, isn't it? Just kind of brings us home to us. We got to be like Jesus. Be like Jesus, intentional in our outreach efforts. Remember the verse, Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Now, I want you to think about it in its context. I often say context is a wonderful but often ignored thing. Jesus is passing through Jericho, right? Passing through. Passing through to go where? If you look down to verse 19 or 28, you find that the Palm Sunday event is recorded there. Jesus triumphant. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. He's about as far from Jerusalem as we are from Tunkhannock. That's about the distance. He's on his way to Jerusalem. We're there. He is going to be fulfilling that next part of his mission. He is soon to die. He is soon to be beaten mercilessly, physically. But there's a day coming when this grand divestiture is going to take place, where Jesus is saying to the disciples, I am going to leave you physically, I'm going to leave you the Holy Spirit, and I'm going to leave you the responsibility. Go! Yeah. Christmas ain't over because his mission is now your mission. His mission is now your, I'm sorry, there's a mistake on that. Put a big X through the word your and make that my mission. I'm praying that that's Jesus' message to all of us today. The message of Christmas, it ain't over until it's over. Until Jesus comes. Father, make us be faithful. Help us be faithful to the end. Help us just be like Jesus. For your greater glory in Jesus' name, amen.